with defensive firearms instruction. We get a lot of people who come through our class with revolvers, and they typically have a lot of questions about the different types of revolvers out there, what we recommend, different methods of carry. So today we're going to try to cover a lot of that information as well as some of the pros and cons. So why don't you talk about what different types of revolvers there are out there?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the first things that we're going to look at is the three main types of revolvers that we have out. One of the first ones that I look at is the one that has a completely exposed hammer. This specifically is a Smith & Wesson model 637. Great firearm, had it for a long time, and I really like it. One of the benefits of a firearm like this with an exposed hammer is it gives the operator of the weapon the ability to very quickly and easily engage the single action mode of firing. Smith & Wesson also came out with a couple of different designs. First of all, they came out with a shrouded hammer. So considering the fact that this could be a potential snag point, they actually built up material from the frame to make it to where it's not going to snag, but you still have the ability to, engage the single action mode on this firearm. The last one, a lot of people call it the hammerless. That's actually a bad representation because the firearm does have a hammer. It's just completely internalized, and we would call that a double action only. So between all the rest of these firearms, they're really good. They've been around for a long time. The MSRP on these in 38 Special typically hover right around $400, which is pretty comparable to a Smith & Wesson Shield. With the different types of revolvers out there, I've always been a really big fan of the 637 because I like having the ability to go for the single action mode, because the single action mode is going to make it to where it's a little bit easier to be more accurate at length. But Ryan, which one do you like?
For me personally, and let me go ahead and just get my bias out here right out of the way, right out the gate. I'm not a huge fan of revolvers for personal protection for myself. I'm not going to try to talk anyone out of it, but just for me, I don't like carrying them. However, if I were to carry one, with the kind of concept of how I would carry it, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, I'm probably going to go with just the double action only with a deep carry or kind of unconventional carry methods that I would carry it with. I don't want there to be any risk of accidentally, cocking the hammer to the rear and having a overly light trigger, which can be accidentally actuated. But that's me. What about you?
I've always liked the exposed hammer. The reason I really like the exposed hammer is because I want to have the ability to engage that single action mode. Yeah. If we're looking at the trigger on this firearm, in the double action setting, it's over 12 pounds, which is a pretty hefty pull. Yeah. So if I'm shooting, if I need to, engage a target that's a little bit farther away, having the ability to go to that single action mode is really, really nice. The shrouded hammers, honestly, the biggest reason why I'm probably not going to get a shrouded hammer is because I think they're freaking ugly. Yeah. The double action only, even though they've come out with lighter trigger weights because it's double action only, I still like the ability to have a little bit more control. Yeah,
so, no, I totally understand that. And the double action setting on a revolver is something that takes a lot of time to master. So keep that in mind if you're looking into getting a revolver. But what are some of the ways that you've carried your J-frame?
So in regards to carrying a J-frame, there's really only about two different ways that I typically will carry a J-frame revolver. The first one is by using an ankle holster. Now, there's a lot of ankle holsters out there. There really has only been one that I've found out of the hundreds of dollars that I've spent on holsters that actually work out really well. And that is the Galco COP band holster. And the reason I like it is because it's got Velcro, and it's also got elastic. So whether I'm wearing a suit and tie with thinner socks, or if I'm wearing, my Danner Acadias, it's still going to be able to get to it. The other thing is it's got this padding on the back end, which I really kind of like because it's going to make it to where it's not going to beat up my ankle quite as bad. And it still holds the firearm in really, really well. I have been in dead sprints, with my firearm on my ankle, and it hasn't fallen out. So that's definitely a good way that I carry it. I also carry it in an appendix. If I do carry a revolver, typically I would like to have it in the appendix position, just simply for the fact that naturally if somebody is attacking me, my natural instinct is to come in close to my body, and so if I have my firearm in the appendix position, I'm already pretty much halfway there. Yeah, how would you carry the revolver?
For me, the two ways that I can see myself carrying a revolver if I were to ever want to carry one in the future would be in the ankle configuration. I think that's a great place for a backup gun, and as long as you're wearing long pants, you're just fine. Very concealable. People typically don't look there for guns. The other way I can see myself carrying it is, again, the reason I want a double action only is they make them with the actual belt clips that you can just attach directly onto the firearm, so you don't necessarily need a holster. And then I'd probably carry that on my left hand side as my support hand, having a backup gun on my left side. That's how I would see carrying it, but again, I don't necessarily see myself carrying one anytime soon. But in your opinion, what are some of the biggest pros of carrying a revolver?
You know, one of the biggest pros that I see with carrying a revolver is quite simply the simplicity of the design. You know, there's not a lot of moving parts, and therefore it's pretty easy to maintain. There's not a lot of disassembly required to maintenance the firearm, and it's very forgiving. You know, it's very easy to get new shooters, you know, fairly confident with a revolver. However, you know, with enough training, we can also get, you know, new shooters very confident with a semi-automatic, and so, you know, there's definitely benefits and drawbacks. Where I see myself carrying a revolver, especially in today's day and age, is more in the backup position. You know, I would definitely have no problems carrying this to supplement, you know, a mid or full size, you know, semi-automatic. I don't really see myself carrying this as a type of firearm for primary carry. You know, and having said that, you know, both Miller and I, we both like smart carry holsters, and I think that this would be a phenomenal choice for, you know, carrying in a smart carry configuration.
Well, I know one of the other big pros when it comes to revolvers as well that people really like is you can get them in very, very effective cartridges. So 357 Magnum, for example, a very effective cartridge. Now, I believe that one is specifically a 38 special and 38 special only. But a lot of, if you run a 357 Magnum, you can also run 38 special, so you can have, you know, the 1 caliber that you use for personal protection, which is going to be a lot more effective, and then you can have the lighter, cheaper stuff that you know, can train with, so shooting 2 calibers out of the same firearm. Now, I still recommend that you get familiar with what your defense loads are going to feel like out of your firearm, because it could be 2 very different feels and, you know, recoil impulses and all that. So there are options out there for very, very effective cartridges. But to me, where we're going to start getting into the cons is your ammo capacity. So even if you have a very effective cartridge, like a 357 Magnum or a 44 mag, if you want to go that high, you're looking at 5-6 rounds max, and in something that you can reasonably conceal. They do have higher capacity ones out there, but they're typically oversized to the point where it would be not very practical to conceal carry one on a regular basis. I don't know, what's your opinion on the ammo capacity?
You know, as far as ammo capacity is concerned, you know, a typical J-frame revolver like this is going to have a 5-round magazine capacity. They do tend to get bulky right around the cylinder when you start getting the higher capacity ones. I think the 686 Plus has 7 rounds, but then again, that's a little bit, you know, more girth, and more girth tends to be a little bit more difficult to conceal. One of the other things to look at is the overall weight of the firearm. Now, there's a lot of these that came out with all steel frames, like the Smith & Wesson 36, which is a great firearm. I've owned several over the years. You know, nowadays most of them are coming out in aluminum, which is a lot lighter. One of the things to understand about lighter firearms is you're going to have more felt recoil on a lighter firearm. You know, the other thing to look at, kind of a pro with that, lighter firearms tend to be a little bit more comfortable to carry for extended periods of time. As far as the ammunition capacity, though, you know, 5 rounds, that's one of the bigger reasons why I like it more as a backup type firearm, simply because you don't have a lot of ammunition. We can reload them fairly quickly, but, you know, as Miller and I, you know, tested out, we're obviously going to be able to reload a semi-automatic a lot faster than a revolver. So if I'm going to carry this, I'm probably not going to carry, you know, backup ammunition, especially if I'm using this as a backup firearm to another firearm.
Yeah, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut in some footage. Like you said, we did a lot of testing with reload times. Now, we felt like it was a good example because, you know, Donovan has a lot more experience with revolvers. He shot him a lot more. He's a lot more competent with revolvers, whereas myself, I have very limited experience with revolvers, especially when it comes to doing emergency reloads, tac reloads with a speed strip. So what we decided to do was see what kind of time difference there is between someone experienced versus someone inexperienced, and then also compare that with the reload times on a semi-auto, which both of us are pretty experienced with, Donovan more so. And for me, myself, again, this was just starting out. For the emergency reload, what we decided to do was shoot 2 rounds and then do a emergency reload where you load a full speed loader, excuse me, and then fire 2 more rounds. My average time was right around just over 11 seconds. Now, for me personally, I know that from my first run to my fastest run, I was able to improve it by about 2 seconds, but even my fastest run was over 10 seconds. So that's a lot of time that you're giving up in a gunfight to dedicated to reloading. I know you were able to do it a lot faster. What was your approximate time?
You know, as far as an emergency reload, I was averaging about just a little less than 8 seconds. I think my average was 7.75 seconds. And you know, to talk about this real fast, you know, speed loaders, which are these guys right here, this is what you would do your emergency reload with. And so the testing really was to gauge how easy and quick we could actually reload. Now, one thing we got to remember about these speed loaders is, first of all, the cost is not that much. I think they MSRP for right around $10, which isn't that big of a deal. But, you know, my personal opinion is these sometimes can be a little bit complicated because you're using a lot of fine motor skills. You have to line up all 5 rounds inside the cylinder and then twist and then pull this out of the way. So what were your thoughts on that?
Well, that's where I ran into all my issues pretty much was, and you'll see from the footage of me attempting to get it to load properly, and for whatever reason I was just having a lot of trouble with getting it to disengage from the speed loader to be able to get the speed loader out of the way. A lot of times it was getting hung up. So, and I know, I'm just going to say it, I know that's a training thing. If I were to get more experience with it, I know it wouldn't be as much of an issue. I mean, there's plenty of examples out there of people who are very, very competent with revolvers. Just, you know, search Jerry Michalek if you want to find someone who can reload a revolver faster than I can. Yeah, he can reload a revolver faster than I can probably load a semi-auto. Now, we also did testing with doing a tactical reload with a speed strip where we would shoot 2 and then extract those rounds, load 2 in, and then shoot those 2. And for me, that took even longer just because of having to get it out, line everything up properly, sew it back in my pocket. I was looking more close to like 12.5 seconds. And that includes my worst run, which was close to 16.5 seconds. And I might force you guys to watch that painful thing in its entirety. But everything was just getting hung up. Again, a lot of fine motor skills in there that I had not established due to a lack of training on revolvers. So something to keep in mind. Again, Donovan, I know you were able to do it significantly quicker. I mean, what was your...
So as far as the speed strips were concerned, my average was a little over 8 seconds. But then again, you know, I've spent a lot more time with revolvers and I've spent a lot more time training. You know, typically, if I'm going to carry a revolver as a primary, which I don't really do that much anymore, you know, what I would do is I would carry 1 speed loader and then 1 speed strip. The philosophy is this: if I fire 2 rounds, you know, in a 5-shot revolver, I only have 3 rounds left. So if I have a speed strip, then I can use this to replenish those 2 rounds or 3 rounds that I you know, had. The other thing about speed strips, they tend to be a little bit more linear, and so it's going to be easier to conceal them on my person, and so that's one of the reasons I like these. And also, Bianchi makes these. This one specifically is through Quick Strips, which is actually really kind of a cool system. I can actually hold about 8 different shells on this, which is definitely nice to supplement with a low capacity firearm. You know, one of the other things to look at, especially if you're indexing rounds, is look at the acorns on the firearm. So if you look right here, what you're going to be able to see is little tiny acorns, and that shows the direction of spin of the cylinder. One of the benefits on knowing that is if you only have 1 or 2 rounds left and you need to know that that is the next round that fires, if you know the cylinder spins to the left, what side of the barrel are we going to put the you know, chamber with the cartridge on it? So there's a lot more things to know about revolvers as opposed to just, you know, putting your hand and pull the trigger. So
yeah, and in order to contrast our competency levels and our times with revolvers, what we decided to do also is show our times with emergency reloads and tactical reloads with semi-autos. I believe, well, I was running Glock, you were running an HK, and for me personally, my average for my emergency reloads was just under 4.5 seconds. So comparing that to the revolver, that's almost a third the time to do my emergency reload with a semi-auto. But again, I've done almost exclusively all my training with semi-autos, so I'm a lot more proficient with that. A new shooter can obviously expect to take a little bit more time with that. And even my tactical reloads were right around 6.5 seconds, which is less than half the time of the tac reloads for revolvers. And I know it was pretty much the same story for you, and you were even quicker on both of those than I was.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that has to do with the day that we were on the range.
Well, yeah. But I mean, I know you were right around just over 4 seconds for your emergency, and then just shy of 6 seconds for your tac. So I mean, a pretty significant difference if you look at the times from the revolver to the semi-auto. So, and again, with a if you're willing to dedicate years and years and years to your life of learning the art of running a revolver, that you're probably going to be faster than us with semi-autos, but understand that it's going to take a lot more training to get good at reloading a revolver than it will to get good at reloading a semi-auto, in my opinion. And then the other big con that I want to talk about when it comes to revolvers, especially when you're looking at double action only, is the trigger weight. Like you said earlier, you're looking right around 12 pounds, sometimes more, sometimes less, but when you're under stress, it's going to be really hard to stage that trigger properly, to get good, accurate shots on target. But if you're running it in single action, you can ring center pretty consistently. You have a nice light trigger pull. I don't know.
One of the things I really like about the revolver is a lot of people think that they're not very accurate, and believe it or not, they actually are really accurate. I've qualified with PQC 1 and 2 with a Smith & Wesson revolver on numerous occasions, and so they can be really accurate. A lot of people seem to think that you don't need as much training to be proficient, and that's completely wrong. I think that you definitely do need to spend a lot more time, effort, and energy to maintain a low overall proficiency, and probably even more so, especially because of the low capacity. And another thing to learn is staging that trigger. So when we're talking about staging a trigger, essentially what we're talking about is you've got the hammer all the way forward, you pull the trigger to a point where the hammer hasn't gone off yet, but it's right before it's going to go off, and then you catch that sight picture, and then from there you pull it the rest of the way. Then after the firearm discharges, you have to let the trigger all the way out, and so you've got a lot more distance that trigger actually has to travel. Yeah. So the key to success is definitely getting out, doing some dry fire practice in a very controlled area with no live ammunition, and get used to it. Mm-hmm. Also, especially with a longer trigger, we have seen people, squeezing so hard on the trigger that they actually dip the muzzle down. Yeah. And so if you're not practicing with it, it's really going to put you in a bad position. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, and another thing I want to mention too, as far as accuracy, if a revolver with good sights, you can be extremely accurate, especially in single action mode. However, be aware that not all revolvers, especially the subcompact ones, the snub nose ones, don't always have very good sights, because they don't anticipate you really using sights in the engagement distances. So sometimes you're lucky to get a good sight picture. So make sure you're looking at the type of revolver that you're going to buy before you buy it. Find out if you can get aftermarket sights. Most of them don't allow you to do that. Some do. Just something to look at as far as if you want to be able to get accurate hits at a little bit longer distances. So just another thing to keep in mind. So I guess what it really comes down to, if we can kind of wrap it up, I know you have, but would you carry a revolver, and how would you do it?
As far as carrying a revolver, at this point, this stage in the game, I don't think I would carry this as a primary. I think that realistically, I would carry this as a backup and backup only. Yeah. I would carry it in an ankle holster. I would carry it in a smart carry. I would carry it appendix. Like I said, I personally, if I'm going to carry a revolver, I like the Smith & Wesson Model 637. If I was to carry this in a primary configuration, which occasionally I do, especially if I'm going to the gym or something, I would carry one speed loader, one speed strip. But keep in mind, you gotta practice with it. Mm-hmm. I'm not a really big fan of pocket holsters. I know a lot of people like pocket holsters, but I don't really want to dedicate one full pocket to nothing more than a gun. Ryan,
yeah.
What are
me personally, I don't really see myself ever carrying a revolver. If I ever do, it's going to be exclusively as a backup. I know there are some nice revolvers out there. I really like the look of the Chiappa Rhinos. I like the way it's set up, so all that energy is basically going into your bone structure. But even then, like we said, you're looking right around $400 for that Smith & Wesson. For the same price, I can get a Smith & Wesson Shield, which is at minimum 7+1 of 9mm, and I can reload a lot quicker, be a lot more accurate, nicer trigger pull in my opinion. So if I'm going to look at the same price, roughly the same size, I'm just probably going to go with a semi-auto that I know I can trust my life to. That's me. Again, I know there are people out there who love revolvers and are very, very good with them, but it's maybe it's my youth speaking, but I like to be a little bit more modern in my my selection.
So, you know, as far as final thoughts, you know, if a revolver is going to be good for you, definitely carry it. Well, I would highly recommend that you dedicate time, effort, and energy in practicing with it to, you know, make sure that you can actually hit your target and make sure that you understand the benefits and drawbacks. You know, having said that, as full-time trainers, we are always available to answer any questions, or if you have any other comments in regards to this video, go ahead and leave a comment in the section below. So,
yeah, and if you're interested in taking some training, we train on a very regular basis, so feel free to check us out on the web at defensivefirearmsinstruction.org. We'll put a link in the description below, and we'd definitely love to see you in class.
Have a nice one.